most of us are never going to accomplish big things. Even for God, like we shoot big. Where I'm gonna be a pastor of thousands of people. I'm gonna go win 1,000 people to the Lord, and most of the time we don't.
We want to accomplish big things. I wanted to be a missionary growing up. There's a lot of things I would have hoped to have accomplished by now, or I would think that God would want me to do. But at some point along the way, I realized I want to do big things so that I can say, look what I did.
No.
It's like if I'm with a group of women and this woman she's been a missionary for 30 years, and then this other woman's been over here doing whatever, and then like, oh, what have you done? It's like...
And they prayed for me, and they were like, yes, I'm glad you came and confessed and all these things and all that. It was all good. And they said, hey, well, we're going to go witness. You want to come with me? And I'm like...
What have I got, right?
Right. I got nothing, man. I told you I was kind of a bum, and they're like, dude, you're forgiven. Let's go.
If it's Christian, we're talking about it. This is the Mike Charleston Show.
Alrighty, well, welcome again to the Mike Charleston Show, and as you can see, we are short another person again this week.
Oh, yeah.
Larry's back away.
He's back away?
He's on vacation.
Larry?
Again.
Yeah, he's
doing?
in Arizona, and so he'll be there for till Monday, I think.
Yeah.
But anyway, but we don't expect him to be around too much because he lives in Virginia.
That's right.
So anyway, what's up, Chuck? Chuck's with us today.
I am here.
Yep, he's like, what a day. It was just one of those just boring days. Huh?
It was
Boring
rather,
day. Not like a tough day, but just...
No, it wasn't hard. It was just boring. And it was also very tedious.
Oh, tiring.
A lot of
it's amazing how, like, you could be working, like, moving rocks all day long, and you get worn out.
Yep.
But you could be sitting... doing paperwork, and then by the end of the day, you're just exhausted.
Yeah.
It's funny.
Yeah.
And there's
Mine's
Sarah.
shot.
Sarah's here too. So,
I'm here too.
Okay, so we were trying to figure out this is one of the end of the year shows. So
Coming to the end. One
with
more
the
week.
New Year's coming up, and I thought, well, why don't we talk about this? Because I think this topic might be interesting. Maybe not. I don't know. I guess you the listeners will judge it. But New Year's resolutions come up, and we always shoot big, and we're going to do grand things and all that stuff. And I think in America, that's what I don't think America is unique in this. I think a lot of places, especially in the first world countries, we teach our kids to shoot big, and we want to do big things, and we want to do a lot of big things.
Yeah,
I want to become. What's that?
We have big ideas.
Yeah, and that's not bad. I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing, but reality is most of us are never going to accomplish big things. Even for God, like we shoot big. Where I'm gonna be a pastor of thousands of people. I'm gonna go win 1,000 people to the Lord, or I'm gonna go missions and go here and go there, and most of the time we don't. It's just, oh man, it's sad. But it's not necessarily a bad thing either. It's just we get caught up in the big sometimes, always the big. We look at David. Oh, he was the king. There's only one king. We look at Moses. There's only one Moses. There was 2 million Jews, that he led out, and there was only one Moses. There was one Paul, the apostle. So there is just certain people that, for whatever reason, make it big, or even in the society today that we look at, and they strive and they make it big. And you think about even in business, how many of us have tried our business and tried to work and do something, and it just fails, and we just it is what it is. You know what I'm getting at? It's just we shoot for these big things. That's not a bad thing, is it?
No, it's not bad at all to have big ideas.
Your son-in-law has a lot of big ideas.
My son-in-law, he's not a dreamer, I would say, in that respect, but he thinks big. He has big
gets things
ideas,
done.
and he actually plows through a lot of times and does some things. So it's interesting to see that. But a lot of folks, they have, like you say, a lot of us have big ideas, or we have big thoughts, things we want to do, and they're not bad things. But getting from point A to actually doing it, thinking about it to doing it, doesn't often happen a lot.
Right. And then so kind of the point of this show is the small things. We want to focus on the small things where God is in the details. I know the saying is the devil's in the details.
The devil's in the details, right?
But God is in the details, and he cares about the process. And whether we ever make it, we got some verses here later we were going to talk about, whether we ever make it big, that's not the goal. That is never the goal, is to become something big. Just look at our show. It's not that big. Yeah, it's fine. I'm glad you're listening, but come on. But it's the goal is not to become something popular, famous, successful, whatever your definition there. It's really just to do what God wants us to do. And in that process of doing what God does, there's a lot of little things along the ways. In fact, most of our life is filled with the mundane, with the little boring things of life, like today, that Chuck had to do.
Well, I like to talk about this. It's one of my favorite things to talk about.
Oh, is it? Boring life?
No, just the little things compared to the big things, because a lot of people talk about they want to do big things for God, especially as Christians. We feel like we want to accomplish big things. I wanted to be a missionary growing up, and it's, there's a lot of things I would have hoped to have accomplished by now, or I would think that God would want me to do. But at some point along the way, I realized I want to do big things so that I can say, look what I did,
Mm-hmm.
And it's like if I'm with a group of women and this woman she's been a missionary for 30 years over in some tribe or whatever. And then this other woman's been over here doing whatever. And then like, oh, what have you done? It's like, I'm a mom. I homeschool my kids. We go to a nursing home once a week. I have people in my home for church, Bible study, whatever. It's like, oh, wow.
Good for you.
Good for you. Like I'm doing nothing. And it's like, but I think the real thing is, can I be faithful to do what God wants me to do? He hasn't put me in some third world country right now. It's like, can I serve him here in America where I have all the conveniences, and I'm not in some grass hut dying of a disease? And I think
that was very specific.
Okay. But anyway, so I think that oftentimes when we talk about wanting to do great things for God, it's not for God's benefit, it's for ours.
Right.
It's so that we can feel better about ourselves. Look what I've done. I've written all these books. I've done all these things. I've reached all these people.
Well, we have to be honest with ourselves.
Yeah, we do. And it also brings the question, can you have joy in doing the things that God's giving you, the small tasks that set before you? Can you still be joyful?
Yeah.
Because we think of the grand when we get there. You
look at it and say, you look back at the year in review, right?
Yeah,
right. Say, what did I accomplish?
Sometimes it's depressing.
You're right. You're like, we don't look at the little things.
No.
Yeah.
When we think of that, we think of big things. And when you do that, oftentimes you look back and you're thinking about things, but it's also related to people.
Right. Yeah.
And it's like, that's a big thing that how many people do we impact by our lives?
Yep.
How many people do we touch? And what small thing are we doing that's going to be magnified by helping somebody else along the way?
Absolutely. Yep. No, it's a huge deal if we really think about it. It's not an exciting life when you really think about it in that way, where we're just going to be faithful in the little things. And it's like, well, okay, sure. Yeah, I understand that. I'm like, no. If we really pay attention to those little details and the little things of life, it makes a big difference, especially when we are preparing ourselves. And maybe these things, when the opportunity comes, then something happens and we're ready for it.
Yeah.
But most of the times, nothing big happens because we're not ready for it, and we let someone else, do it. And it's not even about what can I do, or what can I, look at me. It should still be, how can we glorify God in whatever we're doing? And if it just so happens to be that maybe I'm front and center for a season, then great, then so be it. But hopefully the goal is, hey, let's lift everybody up. All the boats can float. That doesn't have to be me and then everyone's sinking.
Yeah. Well, I think we also suffer from reading about different missionaries, reading about even people in the Bible, reading different things.
And stay tuned for Chuck's Missionary Stories coming up.
Well, no, and we read these great stories of great men and women of God, and we think, wow, like what an amazing life. What am I doing? Nothing. But we don't realize that they have a lot of years that you could talk to them. Right. You could read their newsletter if they had one, and you could be like, not much going on. Well, you could go visit and be like, wow, so this is what they do. And it's not always fantastic, but it'll be one fantastic thing here or one thing here, and then it becomes, famous or whatever. And we just think, wow, what an amazing person. And it's like, well,
I look at my life and it's kind of exciting, but for the most part, it's pretty boring. And it's a lot of just mundane, especially when we were raising our kids. It's just the same thing every day. It seems like, we're just giving them a bath, we're feeding them supper, we're just trying to survive.
I would never say it was boring, though.
Well, that's true.
He didn't say boring. He said mundane.
Okay. Well, anyway,
I switched it up, but there was a lot of chaos at times. But now I even forgot what I was going to say. But what were you saying about the
those moments of greatness are few and far between. Like if you take any of our lives as exciting or as boring as maybe they seem, that in my 50 years, I'm not quite 50 years, but 30 years of being saved, I could tell you some stories and I could write them down and put it in a book, and people would be like, wow, Mike had an exciting life. Yeah. And I'm like, yes, I did have some exciting moments, but the most of my life was mundane. It was changing diapers. Well, I didn't. Wow,
you did.
Really?
Yes. And it was, spending time with the kids, reading them stories, and, just, making sure they didn't kill themselves, for 15 years. That was what was going on. And then just, church things, little, Bible studies that we do, and just little not missions work, little ministry type things that we don't think is a big deal. But a lot of things happened during those times, and I could put it down in stories and give you the book, and you'd be like, oh, well, you had a pretty good, exciting life. Yeah. And I'm like, yeah, I guess so. But 90% of it was not that exciting. It just wasn't. So that's what we're kind of pointing out, is that the life is lived in the mundane, in the non-exciting times, not the big. Yeah. It's really lived in the small things where God tells us to be faithful in those small things. And so that's kind of the thing that we're trying to point out here.
Yeah. Yep. So I guess I'll start with Luke 16:10 says, he that is faithful in he that is faithful in that which is least is faithful also in much, and he that is unjust in the least is unjust also in much.
Okay, so he just got done telling a parable, right?
Yeah.
And now this, once again, we're going to read some verses and talk about some people. This isn't a way to, like the prosperity teachers would twist it and be like, if you want to be successful, this is what you do.
Right.
Like whether we get to the end or not is irrelevant. It doesn't matter. So if I'm faithful in the little, and then what if I never get to that much? So be it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Don't worry about that. God will take care of that part. Right. You just relax and chill. You be faithful in the little.
Right.
So, okay. So what other examples do we have here? Oh, how about David?
David.
Yeah, I saw many things under David. I'm sorry.
Yeah. Yeah. So David, you think about him, and, obviously first comes to mind probably the king, killed Goliath.
Big things. Big.
But his whole life was not so grand.
No, but it was exciting. I mean, it was chaos.
Well, it didn't start exciting.
No, actually, in fact, it started out kind of dull. I mean, he was... Samuel, the prophet, comes in, and God tells him to go anoint one of Jesse's sons to become king. And so he brings in all of his boys, except David. He's like,
not him, right?
Yeah, he's out in the field. He's just a shepherd boy. So he doesn't even bring him in. So that's how insignificant he was in the eyes of his own father. Right. And they're like,
well, he was young.
He was. That's right. Yeah. Well, but that's how insignificant, to be fair, not that he was insignificant in the family, but just that, hey, he's going to be a king, and what's this 15-year-old going to do? What about one of my other sons here?
Yeah.
But he was just a shepherd. He was out in the field tending sheep. That's nothing exciting, but it's needful. It was needful, and it actually taught him a lot of things.
It was a training ground.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
God, during his time out in the field taking care of the sheep, God was preparing him to be a king.
Absolutely. Yeah. And a worshiper. He had plenty of time to worship God out there, and that's what he did.
Yeah, make me remember. My father-in-law was a farmer. Yep. And for a year and a half, 2 years, I worked for him.
Okay. I did not know that.
After Hannah was born, I kind of took a break from school and worked with him. But one of the tasks that we'd have during the summer is cutting hay.
Oh, yeah.
Cutting hay. When you get on a tractor and you're cutting hay or baling hay, whatever the case may be, and you're just going around and around and around in a field, it's amazing how much time, and you've got this dull hum coming from the motor. And but it is a time that you could ask well, you could ask my brother-in-laws, the others that have done it. You end up spending a lot of time just talking with God. You know, it's just time to. We remember riding the tractor in the hayfield, and that was a time where it's just spend time with God.
Yeah.
So I can see how David had a lot of time to worship
out in the middle of nowhere.
No
one can hear him.
Some sheep. Yeah,
that's right.
Yeah.
So he brought food for his brothers. Yeah, that's a small task, right?
Yeah.
Just a small little thing.
Kind of insignificant.
Yeah, they're at the front lines. Go bring him some pizza. That was VeggieTales. But because of that, that's where the opportunity came.
Yeah.
Because he was faithful in the little things. He played music and he went on to slay Goliath and rule the king. So he did have an exciting life.
He did. I
He
mean,
had
eventually.
big things.
I guess depends on your definition of excitement.
Well, some of his sin brought a lot more excitement.
Fighting Goliath was probably an exciting moment.
Yeah, that was a good thing. But his sin with Bathsheba brought all kinds of chaos that was probably not wanted. Like he could have done without that excitement.
Yeah.
But yeah. Okay, so what else do we have here? Chuck just went too far. Okay, there we go.
Oh, so then I have the example of the widow's mite, the story of the widow.
Tell us about the widow. You don't have to tell us. You can just read it.
Okay. Well, Mark 12, 41 through 44 says, And Jesus sat over against the treasury and beheld how the people cast money into the treasury. And many that were rich cast in much. And there came a certain poor widow, and she threw in 2 mites, which make a farthing. And he called unto him his disciples, and saith unto them, Verily I say unto you, that this poor widow hath cast more in than all they which have cast into the treasury. For all they did cast in of their abundance, but she of her want did cast in all that she had, even all her living.
This is a good story. I know people like to bring this, the prosperity teachers bring this up all the time. Hey, give out of your want, not out of your abundance. And I'm like, hey, easy, man. Slow your roll there. But in this subject, if you think about it like this, the people were coming in and bringing much. They brought much because they had much. But Jesus didn't say that was much. Yeah. And so she gave all. So it doesn't matter the amount, what it looks like.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? Yeah. It's the amount of what you have and what you're doing with it. Yeah. And the ability or the talents or whatever she had, and in this case it was money, she gave all. And so in God's eyes, that was much. That was a lot. That was big. Yeah. Because she was faithful in doing what she was told to do or what she felt like she should do.
Yeah, so basically our idea of big and God's idea of big are different. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So just by doing the little thing could be huge. You don't know. You don't know by making a small comment or making a phone call or going to a nursing home. You don't know the impact. That could be huge.
Yeah.
I mean, I think about some of the people, some of the things that made a great impact. They weren't always the big things. It was just that small little gesture that they probably don't even remember. You know, I remember, and I was in Bible college, and I was having a real tough time. I was struggling. I couldn't afford it, and I got caught up in some sin. And my friends. I finally came to and I confessed everything to them, and I'm just like, man, this is, I'm a bum. I'm no good. And they prayed for me, and they were like, yes, I'm glad you came and confessed and all these things and all that. It was all good. And they said, hey, well, we're going out to Hennepin Avenue. This is in Minneapolis. And we're going to go witness. You want to come with me? And I'm like,
what have I got, right?
Right. I got nothing, man. I told you I was kind of a bum. And they're like, dude, you're forgiven. God forgives you. We forgive you. And let's go. And that small gesture, they probably don't even remember. But that was a game changer in my life to where, like, you're right. Why do I have to go wallow in my pity? Why do I have to feel sorry for myself? I need to just pick myself up. Well, not pick myself up, but, God has forgiven me. But I need to go out and let's go back at it. Yeah. It's not the end of the world because I messed up, So it was just a small little thing that they probably don't even know about.
Right.
And
but huge impact.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've always remembered that. So when someone else has failed or is struggling or something like that, give them that chance. Give them that. Say, hey, let's go, man. This is not the end of the world. Yeah. And so anyway, what else do we have here?
Then we have the The
She
boys.
doesn't let me look at notes, but Chuck's, I could see him like,
All right, you got it.
The boys' lunch.
the boys' lunch. So what's the boys' lunch, Chuck?
Fish and bread.
Fish and bread.
Yeah.
So depending on the story, right, 2 fish, five loaves. No, five.
Depending on the story. Oh,
There's
because
2.
there were multiple
Yeah,
feedings.
multiple times.
Yeah. No, it's 5 loaves and 2 fish. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
If you followed the chosen, then you know, right? But
Or if you read the Bible.
Yeah, that would be the other thing, right?
so what? But that's the name of the company is 5 and 2.
Oh,
yeah.
okay.
5 and 2.
Okay. Yeah.
But the small gift, everyone talks about this. The little boy, he just had it was actually a big lunch for a boy, if you think about it. But anyway,
Well, we don't know how big the loaves were.
there were loaves.
Still,
I mean,
5 loaves.
Right. 5 pieces of bread.
I don't
fish.
know. But anyway.
He's bringing it home
His
for-
mom probably thought he needed to share.
That's right.
She just had no idea, right?
Yeah, exactly. He sure did need to share.
There's a great story. Sarah loves it. She read it to the kids. It's by Max Lucado.
Max Lucado, Small Gifts in God's Hands. If you haven't read that book, you got to go read it. It's short. I mean, it's a kid's book. But anyway, and it's I mean, like historical fiction, I guess, because the story of feeding of the 5,000 is true, but obviously they take it and make a story out of it. Yeah.
Well, yeah, freedom. Yeah.
But I mean, this boy in the story was, poor. His dad had died. And,
There's a backstory.
There's a backstory. And he's just like, he saw other people doing, cool things for Jesus and doing different things. And he was like, wow, I want to go and see him. And, he was just like, but what can I do?
Yeah,
We have nothing. We're so poor, whatever. And anyway, and so the point of the story was God can take the little and make it big. Right. And of course, his
what we're
lunch was
talking about.
used to feed the 5,000. So it's like,
that's
wow.
the name of the show.
Anyway, great book. So yeah.
Very great
I had to
book.
put that in there because you got to read it.
Well, yeah, I'm glad I did that for you.
Yeah.
So it's a great book. It's a great story. But that's the concept that we're talking about. The mentality that we're thinking about is to not overlook the little things.
No, not to overlook the little things. Realize your relationship with God has impact not only on you, but on others around you.
Yep.
Be willing to obey Him and be faithful and see where He takes you.
That's
because,
right.
I mean, that's what He's looking for. He's looking for us to be obedient.
That's right.
And He can use... you just look at the Bible. You look at who Jesus chose, to be around Him and work with Him. He's going to take those that if they're willing, He's going to work with what's called. Right?
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah. He's going to use you. Yeah,
You can't worry about what you don't have, or like, I don't have enough money, I don't have enough talents, I don't have enough skill, I don't have enough whatever. Use what you have. And God will, that's all He's asking. He's not asking you to be something you're not.
Right.
So be encouraged that, hey, I can't be something great. He's not looking for people to be great. Yeah. Where in the Bible is He ever looking for someone to be great? He's just wanting you to be faithful. That's it.
Well, and even you think about the great people of the Bible and how many of them did you see them trying to be great?
Right.
It's like God just picked them up and like, hey, I'm using you.
In fact, a lot of them were running the other way. Like Moses was like, I'm going to the middle of the wilderness.
Yeah.
I'm done. I failed.
I always love Moses' excuse, right? His excuse was he couldn't speak. Right?
That's right.
Yeah.
And we never see Aaron speaking for him.
Yeah, for a quiet man, you sure do a lot of talking, man. So, all right. So we got Zephaniah 4:10.
Says, for who hath despised the day of small things? For they shall rejoice and shall see the plummet in the hand of Zerubbabel with those 7. They are the eyes of the Lord which run to and fro through the whole earth.
Okay, so everyone uses the first part of this verse.
Yes.
It's a question, actually.
Yeah.
Who hath despised the day of small beginnings or small things? Or I guess some places small beginnings. I don't.
Yeah.
A lot of Christian business type things use this for people who are just starting out. Don't despise the day of small beginnings. But and it's true. It is true.
Well, you think of even Paul talking to Timothy and, don't despise your youth.
Right.
It's just, the beginning, you're just starting out, but it's like, don't despise that.
Yeah. Stay faithful. Anyway, so Colossians 3:23 through 24.
And whatsoever ye do, do it heartily as to the Lord and not unto men, knowing that of the Lord ye shall receive the reward of the inheritance, for ye serve the Lord Christ.
Right. So regardless of the outcome, this is This verse can cover a lot of things, really.
Right. I mean, basically, this is whatever you have to do, whatever task it is, do it heartily unto the Lord.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If it's going to the nursing home, do it heartily.
Yeah.
Which is really convicting, I would think, for everybody. If you really see it's like, okay, for you kids, that's math. That's
Come on,
doing
man.
your chores. That's doing, all the mundane things that you talk about.
That's true.
It's like, do it to the best of your ability as unto the Lord. And I'm like, wow, that's tall order.
It is tall.
But anyway, that's a good verse.
Yeah, it is convicting. Yeah,
So
anyways,
then
moving on.
Matthew 25:21 says, his Lord said unto him, well done, thou good and faithful servant. Thou hast been faithful over a few things. I will make thee ruler over many things. Enter thou into the joy of thy Lord.
Obviously, we know this story. I mean, it's not a story, but we know this part of what Jesus is saying here. That's what we look forward to one day, is for him to say, "Well done, thou good and faithful servant." But the interesting part of the story that I wanted to bring out of this verse here is that thou hast been faithful over a few things. Now, it never says that they have been faithful over much. They're dead. They died and they're with the Lord in glory. And this is their reward now, is in heaven. So sometimes we may never get to that big grand thing. A lot of us are going to get this response. Thou hast been faithful over a few things. Yep.
Yeah.
Just a few things. I tried and some things didn't work out, but I was faithful over a few things.
The key there being faithful.
That's right.
Yeah.
Right.
Which is what he wants.
And a few things is just what he wants us to do. That once again, he's not desiring us to try to be something great or grand. He just wants us to be faithful over the things he's given us to do.
Yep.
And now we're going to be rulers over many things. So see, we get something in it. That's not the point. Really not the point. But that's what I wanted to point out there, was that we were faithful over the little.
Yeah.
Faithful over the little. Few things. Not much. Just a few things. And yet it works out. So anyway.
Yeah. Yep. So then I have, God likes to use small things, and I just have a few that I thought of that. So out of the dust of the ground, which is pretty small and insignificant.
Yeah, we haven't talked about this. What's this?
Out of the dust, he made Adam, which is pretty amazing.
Oh, yeah,
out
of course
little.
it is. Yes.
Then from a bone from Adam, he made Eve.
You know that joke? Okay, never mind.
Probably not right now. From an old childless man came the nation of Israel. Mm-hmm. Obviously, a baby in a manger. It's pretty significant. Didn't seem so significant, but yeah. And then Rahab, we think of the least likely to be used by God. She would be on the list. It's like, what?
No one's like putting up a prostitute up there. It's like, oh, wow, yeah, she's in the Hall of Faith, because she just believed God.
She believed God.
She obeyed God.
Yeah.
And that was it.
Right. So anyway, and I'm sure there's obviously many, many more.
Many, many more.
Small things, small people, small, insignificant things. It makes me think of, maybe it's controversial, but the song Thank You. I don't know if you ever heard that from Ray Boltz. Yeah. Mm-hmm. But, it's very moving to think, you're up in heaven and... Have
you done that for the Song of the Week yet?
I haven't.
Oh, okay. Probably not gonna.
I didn't know if that was okay, but anyway. But you're there and somebody comes up to you and it's like, thank you for giving to the Lord. I was the life that was changed. It's like, why, and it's like, well, because you did this or because you gave here or whatever, and seemingly very insignificant. I handed somebody a track or I was at the nursing home singing, some worker was over there and their life was changed or, I don't know. We don't know until we get to heaven how the trickle effect works and who all was touched by something I did or said or, I don't know.
Well, because of that song, I assume that's what heaven's going to be like. I heard that as a small kid.
Yeah.
That's your picture, huh?
Well, I'm just assuming I'm going to meet people and be like, because of you, this is how I'm here because of all of these things. And it may or may not be true, but, whatever.
Yeah. So...
It's a good thought.
It is a good thought.
And if you can hear my dogs in the background, that means the Tates are here probably.
I would imagine. My kids.
Yes. Our dogs like to hang out in the garage, and the garage is right below us.
Yeah.
Anyway. Okay, so we have Matthew 20, 26 through 28.
Says, but it shall not be so among you.
What shall not be
before
so?
He was talking about the Gentiles lording it over them. But whosoever will be great among you, let him be your minister. And whosoever will be chief among you, let him be your servant. Even as the Son of Man came not to be ministered unto, but to minister and to give his life a ransom for many.
Yeah, that is the key right there.
Yeah.
It's like, if you want to be great, this one sums it up right here, basically. It's like, if you want to be great, then this is what it looks like.
Yeah.
because there's no one greater than Jesus.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And what did he do? He came to serve. He came to give. He came to sacrifice.
Yeah.
And that's what it looks like. And he did it in a big way. You're right.
Yeah. And he could have come and, been this powerful leader.
Yes, and he will.
And he will.
Right.
Yeah, that's coming. But he
But
didn't
his example
come
to
like
us was to be servant.
Yes.
Yeah.
Be willing to serve.
that.
Yep.
Yeah.
And that's
And
it's not really fancy. It's not sexy. It's just like,
Yeah.
That's washing feet. That's,
Right.
that's for the newcomers, but I'm better than that. Now I'm up here. I'm the important person. No. Still serve. It's tough. It gets tiring. Maybe that's why we let the young people do it. It's like, hey, stack chairs, man, because I'm just tired. But that's kind of the point of the show today. And I know that some people this time of year, it can be depressing, kind of like we talked about, doing a look back. What have I done with my life?
right.
It doesn't matter. Be faithful. And I think that's why a lot of people, and here might be some helps. We were talking about this. It didn't make it to the notes, I noticed. But, this is where where some people have disciplines and different things. I know a lot of people look down on disciplines and be like, oh, that's you want to get into works or something like that. And I'm like, disciplines are just disciplines. And so, people that do devotions, that's a tradition type thing. And yes, it can be a pharisaical thing at times. Maybe you're just regurgitating information. But if that's something you want to do as a family, and there's a lot of love and joy in doing this, and kids remember that and they want to carry that on, and you're being faithful in that. Like, I want to make sure that I'm giving my kids the Word of God. And so I want to be faithful. You don't have to be legalistic about it and be like, what if I miss one? But you bring it out, or you do something else, or you have different events like ice cream night, or something like that bring these things up. That I want to be, disciplined. I have my prayer time. There's some people that have a very specific prayer time, and I don't necessarily have a specific prayer time, but I don't poo-poo the fact that people do, because I know that, hey, these are spiritual disciplines that are important to them because they're just trying to be faithful in what God wants them to do.
And they have benefits.
Yes.
They're beneficial to people's lives, and we do it in other areas of our lives, whatever it might be. I mean, we're going to be consistent in other areas and disciplined in doing things, whether it's
true.
Through health or being able to go out and work and provide. We're going to do things that are required for life.
Yeah.
And it's nothing wrong with being disciplined and having that in your life. Having spiritual disciplines is a good thing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Chuck should know that here. The last, I don't know, when did you go on your diet? 6 months ago?
March. Yeah, beginning of March.
April, May, June, July, August, about 7-8 months ago. Mm-hmm. And it hasn't always been easy, huh?
No, it's not. No, it's not easy.
Small steps. You didn't see a great big step right away.
No, there's no big step in losing weight. It doesn't happen, doesn't come off.
But look at you now.
It takes years to put on, takes time to come off.
That's
it's just one of those things. You got to be consistent in what you're doing and what you're allowing. So
and that's just a real world example.
Yeah, it's just a real life lesson. I mean, it's everything that we do takes consistency and being willing to do those mundane things, and that's what brings about the greater good.
Yes. So when the New Year's comes around and you're like, I'm going to make a resolution. How about you make a resolution and just like, I'm going to be faithful in the little things. How about I just keep doing what God wants me to do in the little things, and don't come up with the big plan of, I'm going to lose 100 pounds this year. Unless you need to, maybe you should. But I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna do that. I'm gonna, I think James talks about that. Where I'm gonna do this and I'm gonna do that. And but just be faithful in the small things. Goals are important. I'm not trying to say that we shouldn't shoot for something.
Well, there's a difference between a resolution and a goal too.
Oh, really? See, Sarah asked me this. This was going to be the title of the program.
Oh, really?
Yeah, we were going to try to figure out what the difference.
We can do that for the new year. But there's definitely a difference between a resolution and a goal.
Okay. I'm curious now.
Well, resolutions are statements. Just in general, you're making a resolution. I'm going to do this.
Oh, yes.
Goals should all be attainable. Resolutions are not always attainable. So that's just one piece. But yeah, there's
there's a lot. There's a lot there. I'm interested to. Anyway,
Chuck's teasing us now. So
well, I just want to say that I think that when it comes to being faithful, I think for most of us, if we slow down and you stop and you say, "Okay, God, at least for me, because my day can kind of go many different ways because I don't have a job."
But you don't have a job? Wow.
Not a job that I go to.
Okay.
But anyway, so what I do and what I try to tell people to do is like at the beginning of my day, I'm like, all right, God, you have my day. So you have to direct me. And if I slow down a little bit and ask God to give me eyes to see needs and to, because I don't know when I'm out and about who maybe needs to,
You actually do this?
I do.
Oh, wow. That is cool.
But
makes me feel so small.
but it's like sometimes we go through life so fast and we're just rush here and this, responding to everything. And it's like if we slow down and we say, God, help me to have eyes to see where I can be used today. Because I don't know who needs you. I don't know who's hurting. I don't know, even my kids, my husband, people that I'm going to rub shoulders with today, whoever I come across. And so I think if we just slow down and let God use us, He wants to use us.
That's a really good point. Because Americans are on the run.
Yeah.
We're busy. In fact, that's how it used to be, hey, how are you doing? Good. How are you doing? Now it's, how are you doing? I'm busy. I'm busy. I'm like, we're all busy. And we don't slow down. And, there's certain times a year where we try to slow down, maybe get together, have a good vacation or whatever. It's a good time to, think about that and slow down. And that's usually what a good prayer time is for, is just meditate on the Lord and slow things down and just be like, okay, God, how can you use me? That's good, babe. That's convicting. That's hits home a little bit, but yep. So, well, thanks, guys. Now I'm curious what Chuck means by resolution and goals, because I like goals, but resolutions, I don't know. But anyway, all right. Thanks for listening.
Well, do you know your Bible?
All right, babe. This is an interesting book.
It is an interesting book.
Zephaniah. We are slowly getting through there. So when we got first married, we had a number of our friends getting married, and really our first friend that got married and had kids and all that, they named their kid Zephaniah.
They did.
But they didn't call him Zephaniah.
No, they didn't.
They call him Thunder. Oh, look at me. You got something. Okay. Your teeth. Okay. So, if you're listening, you can't see. So anyway, jump to the YouTube and find out. Anyway, the book of Zephaniah is a short book, small prophet book, right?
Yep, only 3 chapters.
Only 3 chapters. And this is in the time of Josiah? Well, after the time of Josiah. Well, kind of during the time of Josiah somewhat too.
Some Josiah, some Manasseh.
So Josiah brought revival to the land, tried to bring revival to the land.
Yeah.
And evidently the people just, they're too far gone. I don't understand this. Every time I read the prophets and the small prophets, I really am curious. And we were just watching something right before we got on here. But when they talk about idolatry and they've gone astray and they're serving other gods, and I'm like, how do they do that? What do you mean? What does that look like? How does that even look? They're really bowing down to the sun god or the moon god,
and really taking their children and sacrificing them to Moloch.
Yeah. It's just hard to believe.
Yeah,
but yet I guess Israel has had their times up and down, and this is just another time where Zephaniah is calling them to repentance.
Right.
And actually, his focus is mainly the day of the Lord.
Yeah.
The day of the Lord.
Yeah, the book of Zephaniah mentions the day of the Lord more than any other Old Testament prophet.
Yeah, so that's pretty intense.
It's only 3 chapters, so he was trying to point it out.
Yes,
but
yes. And just like not his other books, but like other prophets, so God is going to bring judgment on people, and he's pointing out things. Yeah. But at the end, is pointing towards hope. There's always hope, and like you were listening to something earlier this week where, God's judgments, and people are like, oh, God's judgments are harsh and all that. But it's actually our sin and all that is bringing a lot of bad things to us anyways.
Right.
And he does talk about himself being a consuming fire in this book, where it's more, instead of like a judgment of anger and stuff, it's more to purify, because we are killing ourselves.
Well, that's the thing. Like the one person I was reading, they were saying that, we read all these judgments and it sounds harsh. We're like, man, the God of the Old Testament,
Right.
like he was no nonsense, like came down harsh.
Sure.
But if we understood fully what the people were doing to themselves, we'd be like, oh, they were killing themselves.
Yeah.
Like they're going to, they were in for trouble on their own. So it's kind of actually, it seems harsh, but in a way it was a way of rescue.
Right.
So,
right.
yeah.
In the moment, it sure didn't seem good, but I mean, that's what sin does. Sin eats away at us. It perverts everything that we do, and then we ended up with all kinds of diseases. We end up with all kinds of anger and hatred, and we end up destroying ourselves from within. And anyway, but anyway, he pronounces judgments on Jerusalem or Israel, and but then he goes on, chapter 2. He doesn't go after the nations around him,
right?
The nations around him, and he pronounces judgments on them. And but then he gives hope in chapter 3.
Yeah.
So anyway,
hope is always a good thing.
Yes.
It does have one of my favorite passages. It had Zephaniah 3:17 says, "The Lord thy God in the midst of thee is mighty. He will save. He will rejoice over thee with joy. He will rest in his love. He will joy over thee with singing."
Right. So the Lord sings over us.
He does. That's pretty exciting.
And we know a song that basically says it just like that.
It does. It's a fun one.
It's interesting.
But it's just cool. Like, I, of course, love to sing to God, but to think that, wow, like he rejoices over me too. Like he wants to sing over me. I'm like, wow, that's kind of exciting.
Yeah, absolutely. It's the only time it really mentions that God sings.
Yeah.
And sings over us.
Yeah.
And so we're called to sing towards him, and he sings over us too.
I'd be really curious to know what he sings.
We'll find out one day.
What does that sound like?
I have no idea. It's probably really awesome.
I bet it is.
Might want to get the single on that one. But anyway, the book of Zephaniah, what you have over here, why don't you bring that? It says, it opens with what we were kind of touching on a little bit.
With idolatry and wrath and judgment.
Right.
But then by the end, we have true worship, and we have rejoicing, and we have blessing.
Right. That's God's purpose in all of this, is to make a place where people can get along and love each other and, the way he wants. But we just don't do that because of worshiping false gods and following our lusts and things like that. But the idolatry is, we were just watching something where it points out that Zephaniah points out 3 idolatry, things, and the 3 different types of idolatry that they were falling into. And once again, I'm just like, it's hard for me to believe that they would, one of them being that they mix. Now I can get that, because the Catholic Church has done this everywhere they go.
Yeah.
The Catholic Church takes the truths of Scripture. They have some truths. I'm not denying that, but then they mix it with some of the local paganism or whatever, and that's where we get a lot of like Christmas, is around here, or Easter, all these different things. They mix it, because they're trying to incorporate Christianity and Christianize different things, but in the process, you're mixing. And so I understand that a little bit more, kind of like he also mentioned something else that we mix. You maybe didn't hear that.
Yeah,
okay,
maybe
you didn't hear that. But anyway, there's different things where we mix different things. We try to go to, like he would say the Jews were going to the temple, but they were also going to these other places for Moloch and all that stuff. But the other ones, it's the indifference one, the idolatry of indifference, I guess. But I don't understand how that can happen. You're following the one true God, and who's delivered you time and time again. And I mean, it's easy to say because now we have the Holy Spirit dwelling within us.
Yeah.
And I know even with that, sometimes there's a lot of Christians who get confused about different things, and they follow false teachers and doctrines, and they're led astray for, not saying they're not saved, but they're led astray, and they're confused, and they're not necessarily walking in victory. And so you could see that, but to just give up on the God of creation and, that was the one, creation and evolution. How you're mixing it. You're trying to fit Christianity and science and making it all work together. So that's kind of like the book of Zephaniah there. Do you have anything else you want to add? I mean, you love that verse.
I do love that verse. Well, I think that, the idolatry does seem so ridiculous to us, but I think maybe, I don't know, to me, I'm like, maybe I should do a study on idolatry, because I feel like, we look at all the things they did and like, that's absurd. Why would they do that?
Right.
But I wonder if from God's perspective, he looks at us and like, kind of the same. I mean, the places change, and, the way you worship maybe changes. Instead of bowing down or putting a figure here, maybe there's more to it than what we realize.
Right, because we can look back and go, well, duh, they're bowing down to an idol.
Right.
Okay, sure. But were the Jews actually doing that? Maybe not. It's hard to tell. But like, what are we doing? Because in the end times, that's one of the things that's going to be there is idolatry. Yeah. And so what are we getting caught up with that we just don't even think about because it's our culture or because we're Christians and it's already, we don't even think about it. And so that does concern me. Not that I'm going to accidentally commit idolatry.
Right.
But is there things that are creeping in my life that, is like, well, my attention is being drawn to this. We always point as that, as like, oh, that's idolatry. If you love something, then that's idolatrous. And I'm like, well, I mean, maybe not.
Maybe.
But there's, I can love different things. It doesn't mean I've given up my love for the Lord. Am I mixing, So I don't know. It is an interesting study, but as we've gone through the minor prophets, major prophets, that is like a theme that the Jews would go back to serving other gods. And I just don't understand. So anyway, if you're out there and you maybe have some insight on it, maybe you can email the show or, let us know what you think on what that means, the idolatry of that day and age, and what it kind of means. So anyway.
Missionary Stories with Chuck.
Alrighty. I always feel like we're like in the jungle somewhere.
That's the point.
That is the point.
Yeah.
So Chuck just informed us. This is the last one of the book. Once again, if you want to get the book, I don't even know where you can get it.
Well, Amazon, eBay, but I don't know.
Missionary
eBay.
Stories with the Millers. And kind of to go along with what we were talking about today, when you read some of these stories, a lot of these stories aren't like grand,
no.
A lot of them are just little, small stories in the grand scheme of things. Yeah. And so anyway,
today's story is going to be kind of adventurous, but it's just something that happened to a missionary.
Okay.
It's just something that happened to a missionary. This one occurred in Canada.
There's what?
Is this through water and fire?
Through fire and ice, right?
Okay.
No, water and fire. You're right. I was thinking fire and ice.
It's a good one.
I like my name better.
Yeah.
Fire and ice. That sounds better.
Yes, I think I know this one.
This is a good one.
Yeah, I like this one too. All right, let's get started. Through water and fire.
It was Canada, by the way.
Yeah. It was 35 degrees below zero.
You know what? Okay, before you carry on, I've lived in weather like that. That is not fun. That is brutal. So for all our people up north, I feel sorry.
It's probably a dry cold.
You get to negative, and I don't know if that, depending on where it is in Canada, that may not even be the ice, that was a wind chill. It is, okay, that is cold.
Yeah.
That is cold.
Does it say exactly where in Canada? It might say
Manitoba.
Okay, that's
where he ended up being the pastor afterwards. Okay. So at the time of the writing, he was in Manitoba. So I've never felt 35 degrees below. 18 is as far as 18 below zero.
Oh, wow.
Well, that's cold.
That's cold.
It's not much different. It's just cold.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead.
Icy cold gripped the forest and lakes of northern Ontario, Canada.
Okay, there we
get the first sentence right. In an iron fist. It was a good day for staying comfortably beside the fireplace and a heating stove. But the two men on the mission snowmobile had a job to do, and they needed a cold day to do it. There go a moose. Morally, Mikas, the Indian driver of the snowmobile, shouted above the engine's roar. His alert, dark eyes had seen the huge, shadowy figure before it melted back into the forest. "Well, there's the tractor," the second man replied with a grin. Alvin Frey, the missionary, knew he would probably never be so wise in the ways of the Northwoods as the Cree Indians to whom he preached, but he did have many new things to show them. When Alvin had arrived at the Deer Lake Mission a few years before, he found the Cree Indians there living in deep poverty. All their food supplies, except for what meat and fish they hunted for themselves, had to be purchased at high prices from the trading post. Deer Lake was over 100 miles from any road, so supplies were expensive. Most Indian families made less than $1,000 a year.
Yikes.
So when hunting was poor, they had little to fall back on. In despair, many of the men spent their last cent on whiskey to drink and forget their hungry families for a few hours.
Yikes. That's very true.
How could Alvin show these people that Jesus cared about them? How could he help them to help themselves? Both questions had found one answer in the tractor, which now stood under a crude shed at the edge of the woods. Christians in the East who were concerned about the mission to the Indians had raised money to buy the tractor. This machine was the first tractor ever seen by the Indians of Deer Lake, and it made a big difference in their lives.
I'm sure it did.
Several acres of woodland had been cleared with the tractor, and Alvin had shown the Indians how to plant potatoes for themselves. Soon the garden was producing tons of potatoes and turnips for the village of Deer Lake. The garden patch was on an island across the lake from the village. During the summer, the tractor had to stay on the island. But now that the Deer Lake had frozen over, Alvin was going to drive it back across the ice. All the people of the village were eagerly waiting for their turn to use the tractor for hauling firewood. "Better measure the ice again on this side," Morley advised. Taking his axe, he began chopping a hole in the frozen surface of the lake. Meanwhile, Alvin fueled up the tractor and prepared to start the engine. When the two men were satisfied that all was ready, Alvin started the tractor. The engine roared into life with clouds of exhaust smoke hanging in the frosty air. "Are you coming?" he called over his shoulder to Morley as the tractor chugged slowly out onto the ice. "Soon as I get my skidoo going," the Indian shouted, bending over his snowmobile. For some reason, the machine was slow to start. Sinking back into the seat to rest for a moment, Morley watched Alvin and the tractor proceeding across the frozen lake. Suddenly, a horrible, threatening crack sounded through the distant ice. Morley gasped and stood staring as the rear end of the tractor lurched sharply and began to sink.
Have you ever heard ice cracking?
I have not.
So a friend and I were walking on a river once, and it was frozen, and you just hear it's. Now I don't know what it would sound like on the lake here with a vehicle, but it was like a boom, 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 and we didn't know what was going on, and we just started running. But it was the ice starting to crack. It's not a good sound. Not what you want to hear.
No, I've never experienced that. Never. Somewhere beneath the ice, a flowing current of water had worn a thin spot in the frozen surface, and Alvin, with the tractor, had hit that thin spot. "Help! Oh, help God! God, help him!" Morley cried out as he tried frantically to start his own engine. Out on the lake, both tractor and missionary sank through the hole and were gone.
Yikes.
Pinned beneath the steering wheel of the sinking vehicle, Alvin Frey struggled vainly to free himself. The shock of the freezing cold water soaking through his thick clothes almost made him cry out in pain, but he instinctively held his breath as his head went under. Down, down into the deep, dark depths sank the heavy tractor. 10 feet, 20 feet, 30, 40. As the tractor tires touched the muddy bottom 50 feet from the surface of the lake, Alvin finally managed to free himself from the seat. "Hurry, swim back up," Alvin told himself, but his winter clothes and boots weighed him down.
Oh, I'm sure.
His body was becoming starved for oxygen after several minutes underwater. "Don't breathe the water or you'll drown. Mustn't breathe," his mind warned dimly. With painful slowness, he rose toward the surface. Fuzzy thoughts and pictures began to whirl dizzily through his fading brain. What will my family do if I don't make it? My wife, Lydian, my children, and all the Indians here at Deer Lake Mission. Oh, why did I lose the tractor? With a gentle bump, Alvin's head hit a sheet of ice. Hope flared quickly, only to be replaced by despair. If I've come up under the ice, I'll never get out, the missionary thought. Well, I'm ready to die. Lord, here I come. Suddenly, the broken cake of ice floated away, and Alvin's head shot out into the air. Frantically, he breathed and breathed, gulping great lungfuls of oxygen to his aching body. His dazzled eyes took in the beauty of the sunlit trees and sparkling snow, but for a fleeting moment, Alvin felt a stab of disappointment. Heaven was so close, he thought. I was almost there. Another moment, and I would have seen my Lord Jesus. Vroom, a motor roared nearby as Morley Meekus arrived on his snowmobile just in time to pull the dripping missionary onto a solid patch of ice. "Oh, Brother Alvin, you're alive!" cried the Indian, his dark face wet with tears. "You were under the water for 10 minutes. Wow. I thought there was no hope." He hurried Alvin onto the snowmobile, and the two men sped away. It was another mile and a half back to the village. By the time they stopped in front of the trading post, Alvin's wet clothing had frozen to solid ice. Unable to move his arms or legs, the missionary allowed himself to be carried into the warm store. "Talk, Alvin," shouted his Indian friends, beating with their fist on the icy shell around his body. "Are you all right? Talk to us." Breathlessly, the missionary laughed. "Calm down," he said. "I'm all right. Just let Morley tell you all about it while I get warm." When he had heard the story, an old Indian wisely nodded his wrinkled head. "Now I know this white man tells the truth," he said solemnly, "or else he would never have come out of the water alive." 3 weeks later, the police put a trained driver on a plane and sent him to the mission. Wearing a special wetsuit, the man dived to the lake bottom and fastened a cable around the axle of the tractor. Soon the mission tractor was back on the job. As the months passed, Alvin began to understand one reason, at least, why God had allowed the tractor to fall through the ice. When Christians throughout the country learned of what had happened, they made new efforts to support the mission work. In church after church, as the story was told of Alvin Frey's narrow escape, many people pledged to send money for the missions among the Cree Indians. 6 years slipped by as Alvin Frey and his family continued their work with Northern Light Gospel Mission. He never forgot the day God had spared his life in the freezing lake. And then came a morning when Alvin's faith was to be tested by fire as well. The weather was cold once more, and Alvin needed to keep the furnace going in the basement of the mission house. "Looks like it's gone out," he observed one morning, poking around in the ashes of the dead fire. "I'll have to use some of this." Reaching for a bottle of old diesel fuel, he squirted some into the logs piled in the firebox. Ooh! With a sound like ripping cloth, the diesel fluid exploded into the air. The bottle blew up in Alvin's hand, spraying fuel all over Alvin, turning him into a human torch before he could react to what was happening. Flames sprang up all over the basement. "Oh no, I'm on fire!" the horrified missionary screamed. Seizing the first blanket he could find, Alvin rolled himself into it to smother the flames. Quick as he was, though, the fire had already eaten into his face, arm, and chest. Loose, shriveled skin hung in shreds from his blackened body as Lydian came running to meet him at the head of the stairs. "We've got to put the fire out," Alvin gasped. For the next 15 minutes, the couple ran back and forth with buckets of water from the kitchen. Not until the fire was doused and the mission house safe did Alvin take time to think of his own burned body. "You'll have to go to the hospital," his wife declared, and Alvin reluctantly agreed. Across the frozen lake at the trading post, the mission nurse radioed for a helicopter. "The helicopter is at God's Lake and can't get to you," a voice on the radio replied. "A storm is moving in." "But Whitey Hostetler can come pick up your patient and fly him to Red Lake." Sorry about that. "Have the Indians choose a place where he can land on the ice and mark it with cedar branches." Storm clouds were gathering. Soon the air would be filled with whirling snow, making flight impossible. Would Whitey, the pilot, be able to get the injured missionary to Red Lake in time? As Alvin lay in the schoolhouse beside the lake, his burned face and body grew steadily more painful. Dimly through the agonized throbbing, he knew that dozens of Indians were coming and going beside the cot where he lay. The Christian Indians, members of his congregation, were taking turns coming in to pray over their missionary. Out on the ice, more men worked to mark a landing for Whitey's small plane. "The ice isn't safe," one worried to his neighbor. "It really isn't thick enough to land a plane on." The pilot himself had come to the same conclusion. "I won't be able to make a complete stop," he rated to the Deer Lake villagers. "Have Alvin waiting on the ice and be ready to help him in as I come past." Snow was starting to fall as 2 strong Indians trudged onto the frozen lake, carrying the injured missionary between them in a blanket. "The plane's coming," a boy shouted from the bank. A motor whined, and the small 3-seater aircraft flew over the trees. Making a tight circle, Whitey sailed the plane down toward the waiting group. His pontoons barely touched the weak ice as he throttled back the engine. "Ready, set, go!" one Indian chanted, holding open the passenger door with one hand. Whitey skimmed alongside at just the right instant. The Indians dashed forward, shoving Alvin into the plane. "Got him!" cheered the watching crowd as the door closed and the plane zoomed off across the lake. Just then, there was a howl of wind, and the storm descended in all its fury. 10 minutes later would have been too late, dark-skinned Morley muttered to a friend. "Let's go home and pray some more." After Alvin reached Red Lake, he was put into a larger plane for the flight to the hospital in Winnipeg. It was evening before he was admitted to the hospital's burn unit. The masked doctors and nurses shook their heads as they worked with salves and bandages. "This is a bad one," a nurse whispered to her companion. "He'll be here a long time." As Alvin lay suffering in his quiet bed that evening, he thought bitterly of the morning's events. "How could I have been so stupid?" he scolded himself. "What a dumb thing to do and cause all this trouble for everybody." Yeah, that's how I would feel. Right? Yeah, exactly. Suddenly, a quiet figure stood at his bedside, face covered by a hospital mask. "Do you know me, Alvin?" came a woman's voice. It was Sadie Yoder, a missionary who worked in Winnipeg. Softly, she prayed over Alvin, then slipped out of the room again. A few minutes later, another Christian came in. "Brother Alvin, you and I never met before," this man said cheerfully, "but the Lord told me to come in and pray for you tonight." Laying his hands lightly on Alvin's head, he began to speak with God. While the stranger prayed, Alvin felt his bitterness melt away. From disgust at himself, his attitude changed to joy. "In everything give thanks," he thought. Yes, that verse means even in this. I can still rejoice in the Lord. Oh, so many people have been praying for me. All my Indians at Deer Lake. I didn't know they cared for me so much. And now Sadie and this brother, whose name I don't even know. Thank you, Lord, for all this love. As Alvin's spirits lifted, he felt something happening to his face, too. The pain was fading away, and he could sense a difference in the way his skin felt. Soothed and sleepily, he drifted off into a refreshing slumber. In the morning, a nurse came to change Alvin's bandages. As the last strips of gauze fell away from his face, she gasped in surprise. "Didn't you just come in last night?" the nurse exclaimed. "Your face is already healed. This is impossible." The burns on Alvin's body took a little longer to heal, but still he was ready to be dismissed from the hospital in record time. Before he left, the head nurse came back to shake his hand. "Mr. Frey, I hope you realize that this was a miracle," she stated. "Most people with burns as bad as yours need to be in the hospital for at least 6 weeks. Alvin's face lit up in a radiant smile. His bushy eyebrows still had not grown back completely, but very few scars remained from his trial by fire. "God is great," he thought. He told the nurse simply. "And I had a lot of people speaking to him for me."
Never said what year this was, huh?
No.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
No, I don't think. Oh, yeah. It actually says he fell through the ice on the tractor in 1963.
Okay, 63.
And the fire occurred in 1969.
Okay. So in the 60s
Wow.
there.
Yeah.
So cool. You say it's the last one, but I saw there's like.
So we started this story with somebody telling the stories.
Okay.
So it ends with them ending the same thing. So it's a conversation and the end of the conversation. I don't think we read either one of them. So you want to read the book.
Yeah, right.
You get the conversation of who's telling what and so forth. Yep.
Yeah.
It's a good book.
Good deal. Well, thanks a lot, Chuck.
Music with Sarah.
What song do you like?
All right. So we've gone all over the map when we have song of the week with Sarah, whatever, Sarah's song of the week, whatever.
Yeah.
And I forget, we were messing with AI yesterday, and it came up with an interesting name for this segment. And I forget what it was. But anyways, I was like, oh, maybe we should use that. But anyways, this song came out when I was 4 years old.
Yeah.
You were one or two.
One or two, depending on when it came out. But
Right.
yeah, this was from 1980.
1980.
I guess then everybody can figure out how
Yeah.
old we are.
That's right. Using simple math.
Yeah. This is by David Meese.
David Meese. He
Who-
didn't have that many popular songs.
No,
but,
not too many.
And back then, so you got to remember, all you young people out there, when you heard a song, it was basically on the radio. Maybe you could go to the store and get the tape or I don't think they had 8 tracks in the 80s, but get the tape or whatever. But pretty much you had to listen to it on the radio. Now, when I was born in 76, I don't know what I'm listening to at 4 years old or whatever,
Right.
but I know this song was pretty popular for a while. Churches would sing it, specials, people would sing specials, all this stuff.
Yeah.
So, David Meese, what's the song?
It's called We Are the Reason.
We Are the Reason.
Yeah.
It's a very good song.
It is a good song. It's very pretty. It starts with very pretty piano playing. So it says, as little children, we would dream of Christmas morn and all the gifts and toys we knew we'd find, but we never realized a baby born one blessed night gave us the greatest gift of our
Oh,
lives.
so this is a Christmas song?
I mean, I guess it could be. I didn't really know it was a Christmas song, but since
It's
it
really
mentioned
not,
it, I thought, whatever. Anyway, but then the chorus says, we were the reason that he gave his life. We were the reason that he suffered and died. To a world that was lost, he gave all he could give to show us the reason to live. And I mean, to me, that's just that's very powerful to think that that he would come and he would die for us. It's like, I don't know, like people talk about, if you watch The Passion of the Christ
Right.
or these other movies. And I know we watched one movie that had like a crucifixion scene. And I remember for days after that, just like crying.
Yes, I
crying.
remember.
Like it's very hard to, just see, he didn't just die, he suffered, he was brutally crucified.
Sarah's very sensitive with those type of things.
Well,
but yeah.
anyway, so I mean, it was a lot he went through.
It was.
Anyway, and then it says, as the years went by, we learned more about gifts and giving of ourselves and what that means. On a dark and cloudy day, a man hung crying in the rain. I don't think it was actually raining, but anyway, because of love.
Well, the storm clouds came
It was
after.
dark, right? You have to understand some people need some
Hey,
poetic
license. We need to rhyme here.
Anyway, and then at the end, it says, I finally found the reason for living. It's in giving every part of my heart to him. In all that I do, every word that I say, I'll be giving my all just for him.
So it is about giving. That's why it starts out with like Christmas,
Right.
the gifts.
Right.
And now we were talking about this on the phone earlier, and it was like, that's an interesting concept. Now, we don't really do much with Christmas.
Right.
But if you do celebrate Christmas, and it's mainly for kids, and when we were kids, we celebrated Christmas, and I remember waking up, and it was exciting.
Yeah.
I was like, ooh, what am I going to get? What am I going to get?
Yeah.
And I was just telling you, imagine the greatest gift that you've ever gotten. And
Yeah.
it's hard for me to think about the greatest gift that I've ever gotten on Christmas, but it's kind of like in the same comparison, where are we that excited for the greatest gift that we have gotten, which is
Right.
Christ?
Yeah.
Because he was the greatest gift that God could ever give.
Yeah.
And sometimes we just kind of, it's a good gift, but,
Yeah.
and I'm glad I received the gift, but but boy, do we show some excitement, and we really love some of the gifts that we've got that are very temporal.
Yeah,
Temporal
exactly.
gifts. And I mean, there's a lot of meaning behind it because of who gives it to you and all that. But even more so when God so loved the world that he gave
Right.
his only son. And I think that's kind of the meaning of the the song, not the word, but of giving. And God gave.
Right.
And we are the reason for that.
Yeah. And I like when it says, to a world that was lost, he gave all he could give. And I mean, it just seems like simple words. Like, oh yeah, we know that. But I'm like, he gave everything. Like there was nothing more he could give. He
Right.
gave his life. And so to think that we were the reason for that, like he didn't have to come and do that, but
Nope.
he wanted to make a way.
Absolutely.
So anyway, great song.
Good
I
song.
know it's old, but it's
Yeah.
really pretty, and y'all should go listen
You're just
to
going to
it.
have to look up David Meese. I have no idea what the album was, and it
Yeah, I
probably
forgot.
was actually an album.
Yeah.
But it was We Are the Reason by David Meese. It comes up. It's
Yeah.
an old song. It's been around, and that's the most popular.
Yeah.
So go check it out.
The Mike Charleston Show is brought to you by Fellowship of Believers. For more information, go to our website at fellowshipofbelievers.org. Thank you for listening. We hope we have encouraged you to stand strong in the Lord Jesus and grow in him.